Hi everyone, I hope you've been enjoying National Marine Week with Ulster Wildlife. My name is Heidi and I am the CD project coordinator. So I'm going to talk today all about sharks, what makes them special, and what shark species we have in our local waters. Let's jump in. So as I'm talking, I'm going to be saying the word sharks quite a lot, and I'm actually talking about a group of animals or a group of fish, the sharks, skates, and rays. And together they make up a group called ELASMOBRANCHS. So this group of fish have some distinguishing characteristics that make them different to other types of fish, like the bony fish, which are called teleosts. So just remember, as I'm talking and I say the word shark, I'm talking about skates and rays as well. So the first distinguishing characteristic of the elasmobranch group is their skeleton. Their skeleton is made up of a material called cartilage. So that's the flexible material at the end of your nose and also in your ears. But their entire skeleton is made up of this cartilage material. And because it's quite a flexible material, it enables them to make quick turns in the water so they can be really agile. It's also a really light material. It's much lighter than bone, the material that makes up our skeleton. So that helps them to stay buoyant in the water and they use less energy staying afloat. So if you take a look at the picture of the cartilage skeleton, you might notice that something's missing. In the center of their body, they don't have a rib cage, so they don't have that protective part of their skeleton that would protect their internal organs. One of the second characteristics that makes elasmobranchs different is their skin. So their bodies are covered in these tiny armored plates called dermal denticles. And these are actually modified teeth that cover the entire body. And this particular picture is a really close-up magnified picture of the skin of a cat shark. So you can see that each little denticle is like an armored plate, and it provides the shark with a lot of protection. It's very difficult for any parasites, bacteria to get in under the skin, and it's quite rough. It's also designed or developed in a way that makes them really hydrodynamic. So you can see that each armored plate or each denticle has grooves in it, which allows the water to run over it really efficiently, making sharks very efficient and quiet swimmers. The third distinguishing characteristic of the group elasmobranchs is how they stay buoyant. So some sharks will have a very large oily liver, like you can see in this picture here. Basking sharks, for example, their liver can take up to 1/3 of their entire body weight. And because the livers are so large and filled with oil, and oil floats on water, it helps them to stay buoyant. This is quite different to other fish, like the teleosts, which are the bony fish, because they have a specialized organ called a swim bladder, which can expand and contract, so it fills with gas and then lets the gas out, and that's how the fish will rise and fall in the water column. So it's quite different to how elasmobranchs will stay buoyant with their large oily livers. So sharks have the same senses that we do. They've got sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. But they have one extra. They have a sixth sense that we don't. So let's explore how sharks experience their underwater environment. So firstly, sight. Sight is quite an important sense for shark. They use it when they're hunting, but kind of at close range. So the object or the prey they are looking at is usually within 15 meters of them. So that's when their sight becomes an important sense to them. But also, light doesn't travel very well underwater, so it can be difficult to see and it gets dark quickly. So for sharks to maximize the amount of light available to help them see in low light conditions, they have a layer of reflective cells at the back of their eyes, called the tapetum lucidum. And this is why sharks' eyes sometimes look like cat's eyes, because they glow in the dark. but the tapetum lucidum helps them to see well in low light conditions. They also have their eyes on either side of their head, so that gives them a really wide field of vision. And because their eyes are important, they need to be able to protect them. So most sharks will have two eyelids, but they don't fully close and completely cover the eye. So some shark species have evolved to have a third eyelid, and the third eyelid is called the nictitating membrane, and you can see it in this picture here. The eyelid is just coming up to protect the eye. In other species, like the great white shark, they actually roll their eyes to the back of their head when they're going in for an attack to be able to protect their eyes. So smell. Smell may be the sense that most sharks are most famous for, and it is an important sense. They are very, very good at detecting small concentrations of odour in the water, particularly when it's of a prey species. But there is a lot of myths around sharks being able to smell human blood in the water, and that's not really true. A shark can smell blood a mile away is something that people say quite a lot, but this has tried to be tested and it's just found that sharks are not more attracted to human blood. But smell is an important sense for them, and 1/3 of their brain is actually dedicated to their sense of smell. So touch is quite an interesting sense because they don't have hands like we do, and we touch things with our hands, and that's how we figure out what an object is and experience our surroundings. But sharks don't have hands, but they have another way of touching objects to find out information about it, and that's actually through their teeth. So they take test bites. And their teeth are not set solidly in their jaw like ours are, and they're more loose, and whenever a shark bites down on an object, the teeth will push down on a series of pressure-sensitive nerves, and then that sends information to their brain about what that object is. And of course, this can cause a bit of trouble, because if they take a test bite from a human, it can cause a lot of damage or potentially be fatal. But a lot of the time, when you read about shark attacks in the news, it's not an attack with an intention behind it. It's a test bite and them just figuring out what object is swimming around their ocean. So ampullae of Lorenzini, this is the sixth sense that sharks have that we don't. So this is another way that they can experience their underwater world. If you take a look at this photograph, you can see there's a series of black dots around the snout of the shark. They look like little freckles. That's the ampullae of Lorenzini, so it's a series of jelly-filled pores. And what these pores enable the shark to do is detect electrical signals in the water. So for example, the Earth has an electromagnetic field around it, and it's thought that sharks can, through their ampullae of Lorenzini, detect this electromagnetic field, which means that they can make long migrations and take long journeys across the ocean without ever getting lost, because they know where they are relevant in this magnetic field around our world. Another way that they use this electromagnetic sensory system is for detecting prey. When fish swim and their muscles contract, they give off electrical signals, and the shark can pick up on this. So in this photograph, there are 7 skates. Can any of you find them? Maybe pause this video and see if you can spot any of them. So it's usually, not all the time, but usually easy enough to spot a shark in the water, as they're these round-bodied creatures that we all recognise. However, some of them are very good at hiding, but the skates and rays are definitely one of the best at hiding and camouflaging themselves in their environment. Skates most of the time will use their wings to flick sand over their backs and on top of them, so that they bury themselves in the sand and they can hide very well. And they do this for 2 reasons. First is to hide from predators. It's much harder to find them when you're buried in the sand. But also as predators themselves, they do this to be able to ambush their prey. So in that photo, you might have seen the odd little tail or eye poking out of the sand because their eyes sit on top of their head. But on the underneath side of a skate, this is what it looks like. So you can see that they've got gills on their underside, they've got a mouth, and then those two little dots are actually their nostrils or their nares, because of course their eyes sit on top of their head. So it's quite easy to tell the difference between a shark, which is the round-bodied elasmobranchs, and then the skates and rays of the flat-bodied elasmobranchs. But telling the difference between a skate and a ray can sometimes be difficult. There are 3 differences though. 2 of them you can see just from looking at the individual, and that is the difference between their tails firstly. So the tail of a skate is thick and robust and will have 2 fins, the dorsal fin and the caudal fin on the end of it. Whereas the tail of a ray is thinner, it's more whip-like, and will have maybe bars or stingers on it. The second way you can tell by looking at them is looking at their teeth. So the teeth of a skate are actually plates that grind down their food because they feed on hard-shelled organisms, whereas the teeth of rays are sharper and pointier. So the third difference between skates and rays is not one you can generally just see by looking at them, because it's about how they reproduce. Skates lay eggs external to their body. So inside the egg case, you'll have a developing skate embryo, and that egg case is normally laid amongst seaweed or on the seabed somewhere. Whereas rays will give birth to live young, so the baby rays actually develop inside the mothers. So as well as being really cool because they have this sixth sense, they can detect electricity, they have that flexible skeleton, sharks also play a really important role in our ocean ecosystem. They sit at the top of the food web right here, and as apex predators, they have a disproportionate effect on what happens throughout the rest of the food web. So for example, if we were to overfish and remove a large portion of our shark populations, that would have a ripple effect or cause trophic cascades through the rest of the food web. And it will cause imbalances. And it's important that we have a balanced, healthy food web because so many of us, in fact billions of people around the world, depend on our coastal food webs for food and for income. Healthy food webs also play a wider role in our healthy ocean ecosystem. So a healthy ocean ecosystem has benefits for us. For example, the ocean produces oxygen. Every second breath that we take is oxygen produced by the ocean. And the ocean also naturally absorbs CO2, carbon dioxide, and heat. So the ocean is helping us fight climate change. So let's meet some of the species that we find here in Northern Ireland. And of course, we're going to start with the basking shark, maybe the most recognizable shark in our waters. So this is actually the second largest shark in the entire world, and they spend time in our waters. There's an important feeding ground in Scotland and one in France. So usually in the summertime when our waters are a bit warmer, they pass by Northern Ireland on their way between these feeding grounds. And even though they're the largest fish around our coastlines, they feed on the tiniest organisms in our oceans called phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are tiny microscopic plants and animals that float around the ocean. So as the basking shark swims with its mouth wide open, it's actually filtering out those tiny little plants and animals from the water. The next video you're going to see a diver took, and he was lucky enough to be in the water as a basking shark swam by. And you can see just how gentle they are. They're known as gentle giants, and they don't mind if you are in the water or on a boat as they swim by, as long as you keep your distance and stay calm and don't approach them. And you can just enjoy that amazing experience of seeing a basking shark in real life. Next up is the spurdog, also known as a spiny dogfish, and they get their name because they have a spur or spine at the front of their dorsal fin. The dorsal fin is that top fin on their back, and this is used as defense and is usually venomous. Spurdog used to be one of our most common species. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. They are an endangered species. And that's because they really embody the most extreme characteristics of sharks that make sharks, skates, and rays some of the most vulnerable creatures in our oceans. So what I mean by that is spurdogs are late to mature. So a female spurdog has to survive for 15 years before she can reproduce. They have the longest pregnancy or gestation period of all vertebrates. So a female spurdog will carry her shark pups for up to 2 years. And then when she does have a litter of shark pups, it's a small litter. It's usually 2 to 3 pups. And she'll also take resting years. So instead of reproducing every year, she'll take a break for 1 or 2 years. So if you put all of that together, it means that it will take decades for a spurdog population to grow back in numbers if it is damaged in some way, such as overfishing. And this is representative of many shark, skate, and ray species, and many of them are late to mature and have small litters and have resting years, making them so vulnerable to overexploitation. This is the small spotted catshark, also known commonly as a dogfish. And they're an interesting looking shark because they're not that blue-grey round-bodied colour or shape. They're brown and they have that flat head. And that's because they spend most of their time on the seabed, usually under crevices and in little caves. So that flat head allows them to fit into those spaces. The cool thing about cat sharks is they're one of our few oviparous or egg-laying species. So this is the egg case of a cat shark, and this egg case is laid externally. It's usually wrapped around some seaweed. And you can see in the image there that this cat shark embryo is developing inside the egg case, and they'll spend a few months feeding on the yolk sac inside the egg case. And also there's little holes in each corner of the egg case to allow oxygenated water to pass through. Once they are fully developed and they look like an exact replica of the adult species, just in miniature, they will wriggle their way out of their egg case and spend their life in the ocean. The cool thing about the egg cases is when they are empty, they get washed up onto the beach and we can find them. So this is a picture of some egg cases that we find on the shore, and you can see that a lot of them look different. They're different sizes and shapes, and that's because different species have laid these egg cases. So part of our project is asking people to record any egg cases that they find on the beach to let us know. It gives us an indication of what species are in our waters and what species are potentially spawning in our local waters. So it's really easy to get involved if you want to do some local shark conservation yourself. Just head to your local beach, look in the seaweed, especially in the strand line, which is that highest level of seaweed washed up on the beach, and see if you can find any of these egg cases. We have this egg case ID guide. It's available on the website cdeepni.org, and it's free. And you can use it to identify what species of egg case you find. But if you're not sure, just send us a picture and we'll help you ID it. This is the goblin shark, definitely one of our strangest shark species. They live in very deep waters, and really only the places around Northern Ireland that could be deep enough for the goblin shark is around Malin Head and Rathlin Island. So you're unlikely to come across one as you're just swimming. But because they live in such deep parts of our waters, they've adapted to live in those types of conditions. So you can see in this photograph, it has a really long extended snout. And that's one of their adaptations of living in deep waters, because the extended snout allows them to have even more ampullae of Lorenzini, those electrosensory cells that detect electrical signals in the water. So by having even more of those, it means they can detect even more electrical signals coming from mates or prey that might be rarer in the deeper environment. In the next video, you'll see how it feeds. It has a really unique feeding mechanism called slingshot feeding, where it's able to very quickly shoot its jaw forward and bite down on its prey and pull it back very quickly so that the prey doesn't get away into the darkness. This guy is a porbeagle, and he probably looks quite familiar to you. He's a cousin of the great white shark. So they are in the same family of sharks, they're very closely related, which is why they look quite similar. The big difference, though, between the porbeagle and a great white shark is size. The porbeagle is half the size. They'll only grow to be 3.5 meters maximum. And they have different teeth. So instead of having serrated teeth used for tearing flesh, porbeagles have pointy, thin teeth. And that's because they feed on squid and octopus. And that's wriggly prey. And to make sure that their prey doesn't wriggle away, they have these pointy teeth to be able to pierce it. This is one of our critically endangered species. They've historically been overfished to the point where their populations have never really recovered. So it's important that we can protect the porbeagle when they're in our local waters as much as possible. But they don't spend all of their time here. They're a highly migratory species. In fact, there was a porbeagle tagged 10 years ago off the west coast of Ireland, and they found that same porbeagle 10 years later off the coast of Canada. So it made a huge migration from here to Canada. Okay, next up we've got the undulate ray, and one of the confusing things about many of the skate species around Northern Ireland is that we call them rays. And that's because we initially thought they were rays, but then as science figured out there was a difference between a skate and a ray, the common name just never really caught up with that. So this undulate ray is actually a skate species, meaning that it lays eggs. So it's one of the species whose egg cases we can find washed up on the shore. And it's a really easily identifiable species because it has that marbled pattern all over its back, so it's really easy to identify if you ever see one. And it gets its name undulate ray because of the undulating movement of its wings when it swims. It's a really unique swimming pattern, and you'll see that in the next video coming up. So next up is the flapper skate. So this is a particularly special skate species because it's the largest skate in the whole world. It can be 3 meters long and 2 meters wide. And it lives right here in our local waters. In fact, we used to be famous for flapper skate. People would travel from all over Europe in the 60s and 70s to come specifically to Strangford Lough to fish for flapper skate. But unfortunately, they were overfished, both commercially and recreationally, through bad handling practices back in the 60s and 70s, which has meant that their populations have drastically declined, and we're left with only a very small number of flapper skate. So this is another one of our critically endangered species. The flapper skate is protected in our waters, though, through the wildlife order, so you're not allowed to approach or target or photograph the species without special license that is granted through DERA for conservation purposes. So anglers that we work with through the Sea Deep tagging program, some of them have a license that allows them to be able to tag and release flapper skate for the project. Next up is the angel shark, and I've included it for a number of reasons. Firstly, because it's such a strange looking shark, it reminds me of just how old sharks are. They have been swimming around this planet for 320 million years, so that's long before dinosaurs were on the earth, and the angel shark to me looks particularly prehistoric. I've also included it though as a reminder. So the angel shark is thought to be locally extinct. We haven't seen it or had any records of the angel shark around our coasts for over 15 years. And similar to other species like the porbeagle and the flapper skate, that is because of it being overfished. So I've included it because whilst it may not be a shark that we will see very often or maybe ever again in our waters, it needs to be a reminder that we don't want this to happen to any of our other species of sharks or skates or rays. So we have an opportunity now to really make a big difference and safeguard the future of the sharks, skates and rays that we do still find in our local waters. And it's important that we do that. So this table just shows some of the species that we've talked about and a few extras. Next to their IUCN Red List conservation status. So what this means is basically they're categorized according to how close to extinction they are. And critically endangered is one step away from extinction. So you can see the porbeagle, the flapper skate, and the angel shark are in this critically endangered category. Our spurdog and our undulate skate are endangered. And even if you go down to the bottom to the lesser spotted dogfish, which is our CATSHARK species, it's considered to be of least concern, but we know that locally, so in specific locations like Strangford Lough, the populations have been locally depleted. So this is the reason why a shark conservation project in Northern Ireland is so important. So hopefully now everyone agrees with me that Northern Ireland is home to some awesome shark species. We've got some of the largest, some of the rarest, some of the strangest, and most vulnerable and underappreciated sharks. And I think it's about time Northern Ireland becomes famous for its sharks along with being famous for the Giant's Causeway. I hope you've enjoyed this talk. Thank you for listening. And if you want to keep up to date with the Sea Deep project and all the shark conservation work that we are doing, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at SeaDeepNI. And the website has loads of resources, free egg case ID guides and shark guides if you want to get involved in any way.